we have 6 murders which are alleged to have been committed by this defendant.
It's now been more than a year since Rex Heuermann, a New York City architect, was arrested and charged with murder, accused of killing multiple women, even dismembering one, and leaving their remains on Gilgo Beach. We are breaking down the latest developments and the demands from Heuermann's defense attorney as his Suffolk County case inches closer to trial. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, let's talk about the latest in the suspected Gilgo Beach serial case. But before we even get to that, we got to take a step back. We got to talk about where we are right now. So, the Gilgo Beach investigation, it spanned decades, and it started with the disappearance of a woman named Shannon Gilbert back in 2010. And as police were searching for her, they ended up finding remains of a lot more people, and it pointed to a possible serial killer. But, as we know, this case went cold. It was unsolved. That is until July of last year, when Suffolk County authorities announced that not only did they have a prime suspect in these killings, they had him in custody because the DA's office had launched a Gilgo Beach homicide investigation task force to focus on the killings or the deaths of these 10 victims that were found during the search for Shannon Gilbert. And by the way, while Shannon Gilbert's body was located, Heuermann has not been charged in connection with her death. This is despite pleas and apparent evidence presented by her family attorney, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. But Heuermann did plead not guilty last summer to first and second degree murder charges in the killings of Melissa Barthelemy, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. Then, in January of this year, he's charged with the 2007 killing of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. So Barthelemy, Costello, Waterman, and Brainerd Barnes have become known as the Gilgo Four, 4 women whose bodies were found within a mile of each other.
They were buried in a similar fashion, in a similar location, in a similar way. All the women were petite. They all did the same thing for a living. They all advertised the same way, and there were similarities with regard to the crime scenes. All the women were bound at the head, at the midsection, or at the chest, and later at the legs. The other thing I think that's been talked about in the media was they were bound by burlap.
And in June of 2024, Heuermann was charged again.
We're here today to announce additional charges in the case against the defendant Rex Heuermann. The District Attorney's Office filed a superseding indictment charging the defendant with 2 additional murders. Those charges pertain to the 1993 murder of Sandra Castilla and the 2003 murder of Jessica Taylor.
So Jessica Taylor's remains, they were different from the Gilgo Four because she was dismembered. A person walking their dog had spotted the remains, called 911, and police found Taylor's torso with her legs bent underneath her, but her head and arms were gone. Her skull, hands, and a forearm were found 8 years later along Ocean Parkway. This is just east of Gilgo Beach. In the state's response to Heuermann's superseding bail application from June, a map was included, and it shows that Taylor's dismembered limbs were found on the same side of the road and approximately the same distance back from the parkway as the remains of the Gilgo Four. As for Sandra Castilla, her body was found 10 years before Taylor's in the Suffolk County area of North Sea. Heuermann was linked to Castilla by a hair found on her body.
We said right from the very beginning that we were going to expand the investigation off of the original Gilgo Four, off of the beach. I think the last indictment has illustrated that. So that work continues, but as well as the arduous work of preparing this case for trial.
Heuermann has entered not guilty pleas to all the charges. He has maintained his innocence throughout this case.
He wants his day in court. I stood in front of you folks a year ago, and I said he wants his day in court. He still wants his day in court. He wants his trial. So he's dealing with it as best as he can. He understands that he can't change the circumstances of his environment for now, but he wants his day in court.
And now, his lawyer says, there is no way that these cases should be all tried together. No, attorney Michael Brown told the judge during a court hearing this week that, quote, at a minimum, Sandra Castilla and Jessica Taylor's cases, they should be heard at a different time.
But they have nothing to do with the other four. There's nothing, no relevance to the other four. The MO is different. The way that the murders allegedly were carried out were different. Where those bodies were, I'm going to say, I hate using these words, but deposited or left is completely different.
Hey everybody, I want to take a quick sidebar from Sidebar to tell you guys about Wondery's awesome podcast, American Scandal. You can listen right now and explore the biggest political corruption scheme in U.S. history. Using vivid and immersive storytelling, American Scandal retraces the bribes, players, and underhanded deals related to the Teapot Dome scandal. In 1922, newspapers reported that Secretary of the Interior Albert Fall had leased federally owned oil reserves to two of the nation's wealthiest oil barons, Edward Deininger and Harry Sinclair. Fall had made the deals to enrich himself, and all three men were charged with defrauding the U.S. government. The scandal, named after one of the oil reserves in Wyoming, would eventually send Sinclair to prison for contempt of Congress and jury tampering, and made Fall the first person ever convicted of a crime committed while serving in the U.S. cabinet. Follow American Scandal on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can binge this season, American Scandal Teapot Dome, early and ad-free right now at wondery.fm/LC Sidebar. So separating counts in a trial, it usually becomes a matter of, is this prejudicial to the defendant for all of these cases to be tried together, for all of these counts to be tried together? Because if the counts and the cases are tried together and they are in fact separate and distinct incidents and conduct, will it show more of a defendant's criminal propensity rather than their guilt on each individual charge? Will a jury improperly and unfairly use evidence from one killing to convict Heuermann of another killing or all the killings? Can all of this evidence be grouped together? Will this confuse the jury as to the issues? Hey, maybe Heuermann wants to testify as to some of these killings, but not others. And this is going to be an evaluation for the judge to determine, is it fair for all of these cases to be tried together? You know, it would be different, for example, if a defendant opened fire and killed two people on a street, same incident, same occurrence, same facts, that would be tried together. Now, Brown says his team plans to file a motion to sever the cases at some point. There's also talk about a change of venue motion as well. So the question becomes, can Rex Heuermann, the alleged Gilgo Beach serial killer, get a fair trial in Suffolk County? You know, on one hand, this is a national case. There's a lot of people who know about it. Where are you going to find a jury that's fair and impartial, maybe doesn't know about it? Although you could say, sure, everybody might know about this case, but this county, you could say, was particularly traumatized, particularly affected, particularly prejudiced by what has been happening there. The defense may also challenge some of the evidence against their client, including DNA results.
The Castillo murder is, I've read the grand jury minutes, and the only evidence that I've seen is allegedly one hair. One hair that ties my client allegedly to that murder. But listen, the basis of all of these cases, the bulk of their evidence, the strongest piece of evidence that they claim they have is a hair on each body. And they said that those hairs were unsuitable for nuclear DNA testing. Those were their words in the grand jury. I'm not making this up. I promise you that's what they said in the grand jury. So we came out of that court a year ago, and we started looking at the evidence, and we reiterated that it is unsuitable for nuclear DNA. And the mitochondrial DNA, and then we started talking about the ratios in the population. There are thousands and thousands of people just on Long Island that potentially could be donors for those hairs. And I stood in front of all of you, maybe it was August of last year, maybe it was September, and I said this. And within months of me saying this, now all of a sudden, magically, we have a company in California that says, no, we're able to do nuclear DNA testing. And here are the results. And Rex Heuermann is one out of a zillion, trillion, quad million, I don't know what numbers they use, and he's the guy that DNA belongs to.
And we've told you before about this, the mitochondrial DNA testing, nuclear DNA testing that has linked Heuermann to the victims in this case, with hair found that allegedly belongs to him or his family members. Now, nuclear DNA testing, as far as our understanding is maybe a little bit more accurate, able to pinpoint a person's identity a little bit more precisely, because it's our understanding that mitochondrial DNA can only rule out certain portions of the population. So is that really strong enough to prove that Heuermann did this? Now, one of the reasons, I will tell you, why this case is moving so slowly is because there is so much information to go through.
You know, we have 6 murders which are alleged to have been committed by this defendant. We need to prove that. We look forward to doing that. So all of the underlying casework for each of those murders. One murder occurred in 1993, 2003, 2007, 2009, and 2 in 2010. So all those individual caseworks, and you have missing persons files, which we have to provide. And then you have tips, which you have to provide. You have phone work, you have lab work, you have electronic devices. You have to provide all of the work from that, not only the work, the underlying data when you're talking about scientific, forensic evidence, electronic evidence. So you have to provide all of that.
Now, the prosecution, they are continuing to turn over evidence to the defense during discovery. In fact, most recently, that included results from DNA lab work, data from Heuermann's electronic devices, notes from searches of his Massapequa Park home, which has been abuzz with activity since Heuermann's arrest. In fact, I'm talking about around 30 terabytes of data, and that's just in one discovery dump. By the way, authorities say Heuermann kept a planning document for the killings with sections labeled "Things to Remember" and "Lessons Learned." Now, Suffolk County Prosecutor Ray Tierney also says that the state has received around 7,000 tips since Heuermann's arrest. Each one's got to be followed up on, even if it seems totally off the wall, just in case, because after all, a prosecutor's job is not to get a conviction at any cost, but to seek justice. And that means presenting exonerating evidence. If evidence of actual innocence turns up, they got to turn it over. Now, one of the questions that the public has been asking is, if Heuermann is guilty, if he did this, did he have any help? Did he do it alone? We mentioned the hairs found on the victims' bodies that may be connected to his family. Is that just a coincidence? He was around them, lived together. Maybe their hairs just happened to be on certain items of evidence that Heuermann allegedly used, or were they directly involved in the alleged crime? Now, some have come out and said publicly that Victoria Heuermann, Rex Heuermann's daughter with his now ex-wife Asa Elrup, may have been part of this criminal conspiracy. Although, to be clear, there is absolutely no real concrete evidence to support this in any way, that any member of that family had a role or knowledge of these killings. I want to be clear about that. However, during a lengthy and at times arguably strange news conference back in June, Attorney John Ray made very controversial claims about Victoria's alleged involvement. Ray, by the way, represents Shannon Gilbert's family, and they believe Shannon was one of Heuermann's victims. But I will tell you, her death has been ruled an accident, namely that she may have gotten stuck in the marshland near Oak Beach, dying from exposure or drowning. However, this New York attorney has thrown his 2 cents in, as well as evidence he says his team uncovered about Victoria via the social media site Tumblr. He also bizarrely criticized the clothes that the woman has been wearing since her father's arrest.
The evidence that we have suggests that we've been sold a story by the Heuermann family. Take a look at the first page and the picture that's to the right. That's Victoria Heuermann as she tried to appear to the press when you first confronted her at the home in Massapequa Park. There she is in her little girl's uniform. She's 27 years old with a school bag draped over her. Her hair in a nice little bun. Very innocent looking person. The other picture is also Victoria Heuermann, as she really is, as she portrays herself on the internet, as she actually looks. We've been sold a bill of goods. If you look at her artwork, in the top page, her artwork consists that she posted online of a human skull. That's just the beginning. After the indictments, oddly enough, and you folks took the picture, you see Victoria Heuermann walking out, I believe from her house. And I thought it was odd when I saw it. But you'll notice she's wearing a shirt that depicts, right after her father is indicted, for these murdered women, it depicts a human skeleton. That's what she's wearing.
Again, to be clear, no charges have been filed against Victoria or any member of this family, and there is no evidence that she's under investigation by law enforcement. And by the way, there's not even clear evidence those were her accounts. Now, Ves Mitev, who represents Heuermann's children, Victoria, as well as her older brother, Christopher Sheridan, this is Asa Ellerup's son from a different relationship, he spoke with Law&Crime's Anjanette Levy this week about how the family is coping through all this.
As we've said all along, they're constantly living in a state of evolving or devolving chaos, depending on which day of the week it is. So they're more or less the same. I mean, just because they've gotten used to traversing this uncharted waters for the last year and a half doesn't mean it's gotten any easier at all. And it's just getting used to something. And I think their behavior and their conduct so far is a testament to the resilience of their character, because as I've said all along, I think certainly most of us would have crumbled long ago under the searing light of the microscope of the media and of all the flotsam and jetsam that they've had to endure as being unwilling participants in this macabre horror show. Well, I think that for whatever it's worth, the DA has at every turn gone out of its way to state unequivocally and repeatedly that children had nothing to do with any of the alleged acts, which are only allegations, and we've stressed that before. Now, Mr. Heuermann has extraordinarily capable defense counsel whose job it will be to, make sure that those allegations, do not amount to a conviction. That's his job. In the court of public opinion, though, my clients obviously have been the targets of some vicious and we contend defamatory attacks by sideshows and people wanting to get into the spotlight by making allegations that have nothing to do with the truth, such as that they were in any way involved in any of these acts, despite what the DA has said time and time again. And it's been widely reported, and I won't go into that, but their road is made much more difficult because of that, because of these vile attempts at basically character assassinations, which have no place in any sort of proceeding, but much less this one, especially when the only investigating authority has repeatedly said that they are not suspects. They were never suspects. They were always outside of the jurisdiction, or in some cases not even born yet, or in other cases mere children. So the fact that they've been brought in by basically carnival barkers and people wanting to capitalize on the media scrutiny of this case is unfortunate. But again, I go back to what I say. It's just another stepping stone for them, as they've gotten, they couldn't possibly have tougher skin because it's this precise type of ill-gotten attention and infamy that they have not sought, but has been heaped upon them by all of the hangers-on in this case. That's made it worse for them, of course, because it's just din. It's how can they separate the court of public opinion, which has already tried, convicted, and all but hanged Mr. Heuermann, with the fact that there's never been a single actual conviction in this case, stretching back to 1993.
Also, I should tell you that prosecutor Ray Tierney confirmed that it would be fair to say Heuermann is a suspect in a seventh killing, the murder of Valerie Mack, because she went missing in 2000 and her remains were found in Manorville and along Ocean Parkway. Some additional remains were recovered in 2011 when the discovery of the 10 sets of human remains shocked the world and shocked the community. Heuermann's next court date is in October. There's no trial date in sight. Not surprising when you see these outstanding issues and all of this discovery. He's currently locked up in the Suffolk County Jail, separated from other inmates for his protection. We will keep you updated as information continues to develop in this story. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.